to my dungeon.
Welcome to Cauldron's Krypt. I'm your host, Master Cauldron. If you're new to the show, we use our combined 30 years of experience to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions or visit the Krypt at cauldronskrypt.com. On this episode of the Krypt, we're going to explore contracts and collars. But before that happens, we need to talk about a few new interesting places to find our show, hit those 3 rules to love by, and most importantly, I have to welcome the co-hostess with the mostest. Hey, Funsize.
Hey, Master Cauldron.
You like my new lead up?
Honestly, looking at the show notes where you have co-hostest, at first I thought you said co-hottest, and I was like, well, that's true. And then I was like, shoot, I misread that.
Oh, well, maybe we'll redo it the next time around. I don't know. I'm just changing things up here and there as we go. But these interesting places to find us, a lot of people don't realize. We are number 1 in iHeartRadio for BDSM. We are now, just as of this past week, on Spotify. I was playing around on my Roku the other day and found the Blubry app, which is, Blubry is a media hosting outlet for podcasting. And we're on there. So I was watching or listening to our podcast on the TV. I know that sounds a little arrogant. I'm listening to myself talk, but it was really to hear the sound quality and remind myself of what all you had to say. And then smart speakers. So, you know, the Amazon device, the Google Home device, Siri, we're also there. So it's really growing, this whole podcasting space, and it's a beautiful thing. You know, I'm deep in the woods with it and go to these conferences and always listening to the news, and it is just continuing to grow and grow and grow. So I'm really excited about our show specifically because it gives more people the opportunity, especially with the new Google podcast app. So if you don't have that, download that. It's if you're on Android, and most of the world is. All right. Rules to love by. Rule number 1, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Rule number 2, kinky. That's KNKI and comes from the Kinky app, available on all platforms. Not a sponsor of ours, but that does stand for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. Rule number 3, submission is not about authority, and it's not about obedience. It is all about relationships of love and respect. A quote from Mr. Paul Young. All right. So, Funsize.
Ooh, is this the part where I get to give you the definitions that you love so much?
Make me happy. We're getting into, like we said in the intro, contracts and collars. I'm sure that we're going to do the contracts first. So what kind of definition is it for BDSM contracts?
They are a non-legally binding but useful tool in negotiations, there to assist with guiding the relationship's preferences, limits, interests, and goals. And they're also extremely useful for later check-ins.
That's pretty yeah, that's just cut and dry. But a lot of information in that definition. Mm-hmm. Non-legally binding but useful tool in negotiations. Mm-hmm. Of course, that goes back to 50 Shades of Grey, where they're constantly talking about the contract and how he needs it for his attorneys, which they did a poor job. What they were actually talking about was the non-disclosure agreement, which is a legally binding contract, but the BDSM side of it obviously is not.
I really quickly just want to talk about a pet peeve of mine with that movie, since you brought it up as far as contracts go. A huge pet peeve I have with that is that he presented her with that contract, and it was just what he wanted. There was no negotiation process for what she wanted, and he kept going, sign it, sign it, sign it, and kept manipulating her with sexual tactics in order to get her to sign it, which is a very predatory thing. So I just want to hit on that's a huge pet peeve of mine when it comes to the 50 Shades.
And she did eventually stand up for herself a little bit and kind of force
end up going back to him.
Yeah. But I do remember some fisting conversation that she said absolutely not to. So I guess there is a very little takeaway from that is positive. But man, you really have to look for it. If you don't know anything about this stuff and that's your introduction to it, which for so many people it is, then that's going to be what you think is real. And God help us all, because wow. So anyway, contracts. What a contract really means. What do you think it means? What does it mean to you?
First off, like we've discussed, it's not legally binding. So having one doesn't mean you have to do something. Instead, it's a document that outlines the boundaries, preferences, and can and should be gone back to during check-ins. Honestly, I found that your limits and interests checklist that you have on the Collars-S website is actually a really good place to start as far as writing a contract, because it has so many things that you can check off of, yes, I'm into this, no, I'm not. And it really helps with getting started. So I would also encourage our listeners to go check that out when they're writing a contract, because it's really a helpful tool.
Yeah, and that can be found at cauldronskrypt.com/survey. And with that, I have to mention early here, bdsmcontracts.org, who gives us some amazing contracts to give away. They come in soft and hardbound copies, DSMS, owner property, and she lives the lifestyle. And her vanilla job is in the legal field. So she makes them as though they are official, legally binding contracts, but she does not make any mistake in telling people that they are. She's very firm. These are not legally binding, but it is an amazing tool for negotiations. And like I said, that's really why we kind of get into doing these contracts, at least as far as one aspect. And on the negotiations, what that is, basically contracts are written drafts of the negotiation process, only they're cleaned up and finalized. And many times when we're writing these contracts, you can find yourself negotiating the level of the relationship, your hard limits, soft limits, timelines for check-ins, very, very important there, and any goals you might have. Also important. I guess it all really is important, but to me, check-ins is where I have made the mistakes in the past. So for me, that's a stress point. But all of these things and more will end up being in your final contract, which is why they matter so much. What do you have with why they matter, the importance of it? What comes to mind for you?
For me, a lot of times negotiations will be verbal. Well, you go 3-6 months into a relationship and you could go, well, you said you would do this or that this is okay. I don't remember that. That was 3 to 6 months ago. Well, if you have this contract, it's in writing. You can go, actually, no, I said that this was okay up until this point, or this wasn't okay at all. And it's really good for things like that, because as relationships progress, you do learn and you do grow, but you also need to have a root from where you started and how you change. So that's where contracts come into play for me.
And you really hit on something that is so important for me. You, of all people, know that my memory is not really good. And that's an understatement. They're diagnosing Alzheimer's in people as young as 30 now, and I often make a not so unserious joke about maybe that's my problem and I want to have that checked out, but my memory is terrible. So to have everything written down, and that's another reason why journaling is always part of the negotiation process for me, where the submissive has to do their daily journals and I'll respond back to those. They come in through email, and that way, not only do I have their journal, but in my response, I'm journaling back to them, and it's a singular topic usually, or a few different things, but they always have the ability to say, let's go to the Gmail app and check out this conversation. And it could be with the 2 hours of sleep that I get a day that doesn't help with that, or the diabetes, or whatever the case. But
contributing factors.
I'm certain that there are, and some of those factors are under my control, others are not. But I think that contracts for me has saved more issues from coming up, and that's the value. Other than, as you know, I like definitions, so a contract in a relationship is giving me the definition of that relationship in pure black and white, and I love it. What is your personal experience with them?
Like I said, it's just a really good tool for going back and going, okay, well, I was into this at this time, but that's sort of changing, but it was part of who I was. And then reminding myself of why it was part of who I was. It really takes me back to my roots of who I am in any relationship. Because as lots of people have found out through their own experiences, you really can lose part of yourself. But with these contracts, it's there. It's always there. And it's who you are, who the other partner in the relationship is, come together, negotiated, written out of who you want to be together. So it's just really clarifying.
We have a contract of sorts. Well, we actually have a real contract, a legally binding one, but then we also have our check-ins, and that is not part of the legally binding contract that we have with the show, but it certainly is because of the lifestyle that we live, that we choose, because it's not a choice, it's who we are. These show check-ins with updating each other on, okay, how are we feeling? You know, are we experiencing some burnout? Are we becoming frustrated? Do we want more out of this? Where are we at with working on our book that we're going to come out with that I am super excited about? And over the next year, we're going to spend a lot of time back and forth with that one. And that is going to be some happy times, some extremely stressful and frustrating times. But because of the communication from the lifestyle that we have learned to participate in and the verbal and written contracts that we have with each other, and then just the check-ins themselves, that will keep us on the straight and narrow and help prevent a whole lot of frustrations that without these things we wouldn't have. And I think for now, other than some final thoughts, that's going to wrap us up on contracts. Would you agree?
Yep.
All right. Well, let's move into one of the most frustrating things for me as of recent, which is collars. And I'll get into why this is a frustrating thing as we go through this, but hit me with my definition.
Well, since you consented to it, a BDSM collar isn't... wasn't that hard. A BDSM collar is another tool which can help distinguish the level of the relationship and also be an accessory for getting into headspace. Pretty simple.
Yeah. And those are the best definitions, simple, cut, and dry. And you do an amazing job at coming up with just the information that's needed. So thank you for that. Now, there are so many different types, and we're going to try to run down all of the types of collars that are out there. If there's anything else that we don't mention, and I'm saying this straight off the bat because everybody has their own style with collars and what they mean. So some of this may not be to you what it is to us, and that's okay, but share with us. Email us, sir@cauldronskrypt.com or funsize@cauldronskrypt.com, and talk to us about your opinions and your views and your practices on the collaring process. I love that feedback. To me, that's how I know that we're doing what we need to be doing. All right. With that said, it looks like we'll go in relationship order. Kinda. Maybe not.
I kind of put these on here just as they popped into my brain, unfortunately, when I was writing this.
Well, that's perfectly fine because they're all equally important. So, consideration collar, what is that to you?
A consideration collar marks the commitment of a relationship that has negotiated what their dynamic is. However, they're still considering the relationship itself. It's the difference between dating and being married to me. Interestingly enough, I've heard this collar be compared to an engagement ring because of the commitment.
Yes.
It's there, but the relationship can still end. Personally, I think of it as a dating relationship, to be more accurate, as you're sure you want to be in the relationship, but you just don't know what it's going to grow to. So you're still considering whether or not you want to be in the long term. So that's why I consider it dating.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes sense. And that is going to be our first difference.
Go ahead.
Because I am one of those people that you have heard compare the consideration collar to an engagement ring. I don't know if you meant me specifically in saying that.
Just in general.
Yeah, just in general. Okay. But to me, that is where it lies. And I point this out, one, because, well, we're not scared of conflict or opposing opinions here, but it's really because it goes back to this is is your BDSM, make it yours, own it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very important. There are certain guidelines to follow, but that's a little bitty difference here. That's not like a groundbreaking issue. So something that we can still certainly agree to disagree on. And I think that that's one of the most interesting sides of what we do when we get together and have these little conversations.
Yeah, because we have very different perspectives, but they're both valuable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Protection collars. Now, I recently released someone from my protection because they're entering into a dynamic with someone.
Ooh, congrats to them.
Yes. Princess Puddles. In fact, she's one of our supporters, one of our producers. Ooh. And on that note, let me take a brief tangent.
Okay.
To thank our producers, our executive producers, Jeremiah and Silas, our senior producers, Matt, Jeremy, and Emerald Wolf, our producers, Kane Sin, Princess Puddles, and Heather, and our junior producers, K2SO, who was our very first producer, our very first Patreon supporter. And I got to meet him a couple weeks ago, went to a munch in Kentucky, drove about 3 hours up there to do that. And that community is absolutely amazing. They were so welcoming, and I will certainly be back to see them. But it was nice to finally get to meet him in person and his amazing wife. It means so much. And then, of course, Irish Mountain Dragon, your very own husband, mm-hmm. Buffalo Dom 84, and LX Sumi, Sumi, and Pain Waits is a new one. So thank you so much to all of our producers, whether it's an executive producer, junior producer, or anything in between. We are very grateful for your support. And if you would like to become one of our producers, just go to cauldronscript.com/support and you can get all the information on that you need. And we will say your name every episode. But back to protection collars and Princess Puddles and getting into that. She had gone through a very rough situation and didn't know which way to turn. She's a dear friend of mine. So I reached out and offered her protection. Now, I didn't give her a protection collar, but if I did, this would have been a collar which represents that submissive was under my protection as a dominant. Though occasionally a dominant may also come under the protection of another, which I've talked about before. I've actually done that in the past when I was being stalked and needed other people to handle the situation for me because I was afraid that I may do something completely inappropriate due to the massive amount of frustration and anger that the situation was causing me. But I've seen this during periods of discord in the community and in times where a predatory bottom has surfaced. And that's actually something also that has happened recently within my own community. Someone who was very quick to get attention by saying that they have been assaulted in some way when it was in a public play space and other people were around and witnessing what took place and knows that it was just an outreach for attention. Unfortunately, there's certain psych diagnoses that kind of dictate that type of behavior, and that's what it was. But do you have any personal experience with protection collars?
Actually, no. I have never offered mine, and I have never received one, strangely enough. Wow. So nothing personal from me on that. Okay. I do know others who have come under them. I have had others turn to me for momentary protection or for assistance in leaving situations to go into another dominant's household for protection, but I have never officially given this collar or anything. So I guess I'm lucky in that sense.
Mm-hmm. I've given a protection collar a few times. Like I said, I did not do it with Princess Puddles, and for no particular reason. There was absolutely no reason why. But as far as FetLife goes and the community, so I guess I gave her a virtual collar because it was posted there on Fet, but everyone knew it, and the response was pretty good and respectful from everyone except for the people that forced her to seek out protection. Imagine that.
What a shocker.
Yeah, what a shocker. But thankfully that situation is over with. So as that situation is over with, so I think is our conversation about the protection collar, let's move on to training collars. One of my favorite and a collar that I recently bestowed upon someone's neck.
Ooh, they're so lucky.
and I am very lucky that they accepted it.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. So training collars. You know, I love this. I get definitions of each and every little section here.
I knew you would love doing this show. These are collars typically worn when the bottom is in a training phase of the relationship. They indicate the purpose of learning a specific aspect, the interplay of that relationship, or for a specific relationship dynamic between mentor/trainer and student. And I still have my training collar from way back when, and I still love that thing. It hangs in a place of honor for me.
It's one of my favorite things as far as collars go, because that is really what kicks off the relationship. That's what kicks off the dynamic and will set the precedence for the entire relationship. It's the foundation to me. Getting used to those habits and those requirements of the dominant. And in the same aspect, a good dominant also understands that they're being trained as well. As a dominant, I may not wear a training collar, but I'm learning the submissive even more than she's learning my requirements, my protocol. How do you feel about that? Being the greedy one on both sides of the slash.
Greedy? I love that you brought that up, because I can't tell you the number of times I've encountered a submissive, especially a new submissive, and they will go, okay, dominate me. And then they'll go, wait, I don't want you to do it like this. Okay. Don't just expect your dominant or any dominant top, no matter what end you're looking at for this. Don't expect them to automatically know you and what's going to set you off or what you need and want most. It's a learning process for us too.
Yes.
So I absolutely love that you brought up that dominance need training.
Absolutely. I mean, you can be as dumbly dumb as you want to be, but you
don't know everything.
You don't. And every person is different. And I've often said that the dom that treats every submissive the same is doing it wrong or doesn't know what they're doing, or both apply. And I maintain that. And other people who may be in a different type of BDSM culture or a different belief, that's one of the things that I would stand firm on. Earlier this episode, I just talked about opposing opinions and things of that nature and how much I enjoy it. But that is one of those things that I will stand firm on in my belief that that is doing it wrong, that is someone who either doesn't know what they're doing, or they're just that big of a narcissist that they use BDSM as a way to abuse people. And that's really what they get off on. I'm a sadist. That doesn't mean that I get off on abusing people. That means that I get off on inflicting physical pain on people. But there are deeper things behind that. There's actual levels of sadists. And I'm a level 2. There's 3 where they would inflict pain that people don't want. These can actually be sadists who are rapists. And then there are those that inflict so much pain, which would be a level 4, that will take it to that final level of death. And that's what they get off on, is pushing to that extreme. Level 3s and 4s are sadists that you don't want to run into. But unfortunately, a lot of the people that say, this is my protocol, this is what you're going to learn. If you don't do this, you're going to be punished. There is no negotiation on this. This is how it is. Like it or leave it. Honestly, I hope that you're healthy enough when you're faced with this kind of situation to leave it. But the training collar, to me, one of the foundations of a lasting relationship or dynamic, and I absolutely love it. Now, there is another collar that's a whole lot more fun that...
Before we move on, I
Yes.
do want to share a story.
Oh, okay, good.
I do want to share a training collar story. So, as people have picked up on, and as I'm starting to admit to more and more, I'm a little bit of a brat. So, back when I was first
Yes,
training...
you are, and it's really good to hear you confess that.
So glad I can hit that sweet spot for you.
With all due respect, of course.
It's all right. It's all right. So back when I was first starting out, I had this whole thing where I understood that I had a submissive side, and I understood that I needed to submit. But submitting to men, as I've discussed before, was extremely difficult to me, and I had a male trainer. So part of our starting ceremony for every training session would be that I would have to kneel, bend forward, exposing the back of my neck, and have him put the training collar on me. And at first, it was the hardest thing in the world for me to do. And now it is the easiest to accept that submission from myself. Mm-hmm. To yield to myself. So for me, that's a really important part of training that involves the training collar. So I just really wanted to share that story. Now we can move on to the fun parts.
Well, now that you've said that, when I go to my training's house, which is where we just wrapped up yesterday, we spent all day finishing up the play space, which is a pretty good, nice play space at her house, which I can't wait to show you when you're here in September. Yeah, so I'm really excited. And there's a Flo Nightingale, and my good friend and her amazing dominant will be in town. Rhett Butler is his name, are in town today for a munch, and they are going to be doing some of the demos at KWI, which is Cauldron's Weekend Intensive. If you don't know about that, go to cauldronskrypt.com/KWI. Link will be in the show notes for information on that. But it's a very intensive weekend planned for one-on-one and some more advanced learning opportunities. But they're going to be in town, and Princess Puddles is going to be a demo bottom for some medical play, and Flo Nightingale and her are going to come over, and we're going to christen the play space tonight, and they are going to practice for the demo. So it's going to be amazing. Some of the stuff that they're doing is very 101, but they are going to have a very advanced demo that I am incredibly excited to witness. And I'm not even going to talk about it. You'll just have to come and witness this for yourself, learn some things, have a good time. But my point in bringing it up with the training collar is every time that I go to her house, she has a box that she keeps her collar in, because by my rules, she's not allowed to wear it unless she is in my presence or unless I have her doing a task. And if I'm not around, then she is to place it on her neck herself to perform this task that I've given her. But when I get to her house, she will open the door for me. Of course, meet me at the door, open. I will walk through the door, and the second that that door is shut, she is to be on her knees presenting her collar, and I will take it from her where she'll raise her hair, and I will place it on her neck. Typically, I will walk behind her to do this and then walk in front of her and usually give her a little kiss on the forehead and reach my hands out for her to take to help her stand again. But it's always a beautiful moment, and it sets that headspace for her to just flip that switch into training mode where, okay, this is what we're doing now. I am a sponge. Teach me. And without it, because there's been a few times when I've been over and I'm like, you know what, skip the collar, because what we're going to be doing is like cleaning and things of that nature. And I just didn't want the chance of messing it up or something like that. So we would still go through the routine, but we would actually skip the actual placing of the collar on her. And those times I could tell a difference. Mm-hmm. It doesn't put her in that headspace like you were talking about. And yeah, I don't know if I will continue to make certain exceptions for certain activities that we may be doing, because it's so critical in her training. It becomes such an important part of the training process. And it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful thing just to watch that switch. And I mean, it is just instant. You've seen it. You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. I've felt it.
Yeah. And as a dominant, I can feel it. And I know, like I said, you're the greedy when you're on both sides of that slash. Mm-hmm. So I know that you have felt both aspects of that. And it's, so cool. So cool. Let's move on. I've rattled enough about that. What I started to say moments ago was moving into this next topic of one of my favorite things when it comes to instant gratification and being a hedonist. And that is
greedy.
Right. Play collars. These are just worn for the duration of a scene. And, I allow myself to kind of frenzy with how much I will scene and with how many different people.
And then your shoulders hurt.
Yeah. I've had a surgery or two on those.
I know.
And I'm a self-diagnosed scene whore. I do. Yeah, I'm going to leave that in there. I'm hoping that iTunes doesn't tag us, but I will scene with anybody. Now, by using that word, I don't mean sexually, but men, women, whatever the sexual orientation, I don't care. I will scene with anyone at just about any time because I love the exchange. And as I've said just moments ago, I'm a sadist. But they often are significant to assisting with that slipping into headspace. And that's what we talk about a lot is the headspace. And not only to the sub, but to the dominant, as I just said with training collars, with putting that on the person's neck. And sometimes it's not a collar. And I want to bring this up that I don't put a collar on everybody that I've seen with, but sometimes it's just putting cuffs on somebody to shackle them to a St. Andrew's cross or rope to put them in a harness or a tie. Sometimes that will carry the same significance to me in my headspace as that play collar. Now, I know that you and I have discussed an article from Miriam on FetLife, and you've put a link to that in the show notes, but there was a quote that was in that article. I can't remember exactly what it is. Do you remember it?
Yeah, the quote is, "It's an agreement between the person wearing it and the holder of the collar, but only for so long as they are wearing it. When it comes off, that agreement is done." And I thought that was just a really beautiful way of explaining what a play collar was.
Yeah. And if you don't follow Miriam on, and it's Meronyym, Meronyym on FetLife, very prolific writer. Amazing articles. There's hundreds, if not thousands of articles. So check those out. Any final thoughts on the play collar?
Nope. It's pretty simple.
Okay. Well, I've kind of been in control for where we're going with each of these. So I will relinquish.
You in control, Master Cauldron.
I know.
That?
I know, but here's an even bigger shocker. I'm going to relinquish that for a moment and let you pick the next one that we talk about.
All right. So the next one we're going to talk about is day collars. These are collars worn either for the purpose of day-to-day activities or to show the preferred role in the community. If you're in a committed DS or MS relationship with a collar that is blatantly BDSM related, but say you have to go to work or to the grocery store or on a family outing, a day collar is the way that you're going to show your respect for your partner and for that relationship without outing yourself. It can be a simple piece of jewelry specifically worn for that purpose. It's something that you can wear in public where people will not go, "Oh, hey, that person's really into kink." Because they're not going to notice. They're going to look at you and go, "Oh, that's a nice necklace." And that'll be that. Pretty simple. I actually still have a day collar, which is just a very simple pendant necklace back from when I was in an MS relationship.
Nice.
And I haven't worn it since because I'm not in that relationship anymore, but I keep it because it is a memento of what that meant to me.
I know a lot of times on these day collars, and there are websites that you can get these that are specifically designed as day collars because a lot of them will have what's called a symbolic leash on them, which would be just a little chain that comes off of it that is, of course, going to be made out of the same type of material that the necklace itself or the day collar itself is made out of. But it just kind of hangs, and I notice a lot of submissives at munches, if they start getting nervous or something, where in a kinky environment, they would possibly start running their fingers along their collar. With the day collar, a lot of times they will start kind of fidgeting with that symbolic leash, and it brings them comfort and eases some of their nervous energy.
The other thing that some people will do with their day collars, or as I like to also think of them in this case as availability collars, is that they'll wear them to events. like munches, and it's just to symbolize that is their preferred role, and they tend to be very plain at that point. So if you do see someone and they're wearing something like that, it could be that it's just their way of going, hey, I'm a submissive, this is my preferred role, in which case just ask if you're not sure, which is always just a good rule.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to communication, doesn't it?
Doesn't it always end up back there?
If I only had a nickel.
All right, so now that we've talked about day callers, let's jump into the most committiest of the commitment callers, which is, of course, the commitment caller. I'm clearly in a mood today, folks. And I'm actually tempted to throw in wedding bells here because that's the level of commitment that this caller possesses. In MS, these are also typically referred to as slave callers, and they're typically those lovely locked steel rings you see. In DS relationships, a commitment caller denotes a permanent or long-term bond. Many commitment callers are given during a formal ceremony, much like a wedding ceremony. And I actually have only ever received one of these, which, surprise, surprise, came from my master. And I still have this collar because it means that much to me. And I'm pretty sure you have given at least one of these, Master Cauldron?
Yes, I have. At least one of these. I have given a couple of these.
Okay.
Over the years. And, well, you know, I mean, we're talking 24 years, whatever.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So, fortunately, I have had the pleasure of being in some of these very serious committed relationships that were of the MS dynamic. These are callers that I've never requested back. As we've talked about before, I don't do that, except for in one case where it was demanded that it be given back due to the level of disrespect that took place that ended that dynamic. I also call these, in a DS dynamic, not an MS dynamic, a full collar. Mm-hmm. There's commitment collar, or you may hear me refer to it as a full collar, meaning that it is complete. The relationship is set. It is fully involved, fully committed, and moving forward, continuing to grow and learn. That doesn't mean that all of the growth and the learning and the communication stops at this point, which is very important because this is something that I see so often. And the reason that these end, in fact, I've been guilty of this many times myself. The reason that these end is because the communication stops and people get set in their ways, and it leads to the relationship turning vanilla, which is not satisfying to either person. But by the time it's recognized, it's usually too late, to be honest, in my experience and witnessing the experience of other people. I happen to know that on Sunday night in September at KWI, there's going to be a ceremony where someone will be receiving their full collar.
Oh, that's just lovely.
So the ones that are there for just KWI from Friday night to Sunday morning are going to miss this. But if you're on the Thursday to Monday package, then you will get to witness a very special collaring ceremony take place that evening, Sunday evening. Surprise, surprise. So, yeah. Okay, here's a question, and we kind of touched on this. Mm-hmm. Well, we definitely touched on this, but I want to reiterate this point. How do we know which is which?
Pretty simple. Goes back to communication. Ask. If you end up talking to someone who's wearing a collar and you're not sure of the meaning, just ask. It will never be viewed as rude to go, excuse me, I was just wondering what that means to you.
On that, and this is one of the reasons why I brought this back up, is because I have seen this happen so many times by the new and the old. Mm-hmm. But when you ask, never reach out and touch it to comment on how beautiful it is.
No, that's rude.
That goes so far beyond rude to me. That's huge. You never, ever touch someone else's collar unless you are specifically invited to. And I can't think of any circumstance where that is a case, with the exception of one time, someone was wearing a day collar. I was playing with a friend of mine's slave, and he asked me. He wasn't present. We had an immense amount of trust with each other, and he was not present. And he asked me specifically to go through the process with her of removing it for play. And that's the only time in my life that I can think of that I've ever touched someone's collar that was not given by me. Period. And I felt incredibly uncomfortable doing it then. But at Munches and things like that, like when we're talking about day collars, and I've almost made this mistake myself because I've seen some collars, day collars, handmade or ordered things, special ordered things, or even things that people picked up at Tractor Supply or Rural King that were just really beautiful. And it's like, ooh, pretty shiny thing. I want to touch it. But no. Have you ever had anybody reach for yours?
There's been a couple people just coming into the community or close friends of mine who, of course, know about this side of my life, who have instinctually reached out to feel one. And I always step back and say, please don't do that. And I leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's happened a few times. But for people that are part of the lifestyle to the point where they have gained these experiences, in my mind, they should know. You don't go around wearing other people's engagement rings or trying to touch them or touching people's wedding rings and things like that. So touch other people's collars. It's kind of a major etiquette point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have seen someone be very, very harsh in a punishment to their submissive because they reached out and touched someone else's collar. And they should have known. I mean, these were veterans. Like I said, I mean, it's a mistake that I've almost made myself because it's pretty and shiny and it's new or unique or whatever the case. And it's just like, moth to a flame. I want to touch. But yeah, no, not cool. Not cool at all. Now, I have given permission as a dominant for someone else to touch a collar that I have given. And in that case, I actually left it up to the submissive to make the final decision on that without it being a test. And that was very important, that she knew that it was not a test, that if she wanted it was one of her best friends to be able to examine it, I left it up to her and she chose not to allow it. And her friend thankfully understood. She was pretty vanilla, didn't really understand the protocol, but it was well explained to her. But generally, yeah, just don't. And that gets me thinking, talking about, ooh, pretty shiny custom or custom ordered, custom made. What's it made out of? Where it comes from? Enlighten.
Okay, so we're going to talk about what collars are made of in order to enlighten you. And I've actually got it broken down into two different kind of types as far as that goes, which are traditional and non-traditional. In this sense, traditional are those that look like collars. And these are typically made of leather, PVC, rubber, steel, and linked chain. They may have D-rings or leashes, be locking, or have jewels or spikes. The design should be very personal to that relationship. You can actually even find custom-made ones on Etsy, which are handmade, especially if you're into pet play. I found an Etsy creator that does them specifically for kitten play, and I'm thinking of purchasing one just for decoration to keep on a shelf for myself because they are so wonderfully beautiful. So it's just a matter of personal taste and what you want to symbolize within your relationship.
Yeah. With mine for her training collar, and I purchased this from Rural King. It's like the Lowe's of farm supply. She is very much into Native American design and culture, going to powwows and things like this. And this is a part of her heritage. But this one, it's brown leather, and in the center of it, it widens out, and then there's beadwork in there that's very native looking. And when I saw it, I just knew, okay, this is the one that represents her. Yeah, I don't know, just kind of sharing that design and why I picked it.
Yeah, it's all about what your purpose is and what you're trying to say. Going back to what collars are made of, let's get into the non-traditional collars, which are the ones that do not look at all like collars. It can be a ring, a necklace, another piece of jewelry, but it could also be a certain piercing, branding, scarification design, or tattoo. I strongly recommend staying away from anything that modifies your physical person, at least until you've reached the commitment collar, and even then. However, I'm not going to be a complete hypocrite, because along with my traditional collar from my master, I actually have a piece of scarification on my left breast in his initial, which is very faint, but is still there and will always be there throughout my life.
I did not know that.
Not many people do.
They do now.
They do now. The only one I think that has ever truly noticed it is my husband, who I had already started dating by the time that it was placed there, because I had been in this MS relationship for 2 years when I started dating my husband.
Wow.
Yeah. So of course he saw it when it was very fresh, and now he sees it now that it's, a very faint scar.
Yeah, but still precious nonetheless.
It's very precious to me, and the fact that it is placed so very close to my heart, I think really says something about what that relationship meant to us.
On that note, I'm like you when it comes to giving caution. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm a workaholic. And when I was working at the hospital, I always have to satisfy both the professional and the bad boy side. I've been an artist pretty much my whole life. And in order to satisfy that side, I became a tattoo artist, doing my apprenticeship at a professional studio in the evenings and on the weekends when I was away from the hospital. So during the day, I'm a suit and tie wearing member of healthcare administration. And then in the evenings, the suit came off and I jumped into my role as a tattooing apprentice and then a tattooist. Almost every single relationship, no matter how long that relationship had been going on, it seemed within 6 months to a year of people coming in and getting tattoos or piercings to represent each other in their relationship, that relationship would end. So I highly, I don't really believe in curses or that kind of thing, but more often than not, it was people taking this step not because their relationship was at that place to take the step, but because their relationship was at a place that they thought some major act of showing just how strong it was would actually make it strong. And that's never the case. That's like, oh, we're having severe troubles in our marriage. Let's throw a baby in the mix. That'll fix it. No, it won't.
No.
So I highly encourage people to not do piercings, branding, scarification, or tattoos to signify their dynamic. It's not even that I recommend it. It's that I'm almost absolutely against it. And I know what yours means to you. And in my opinion, quite frankly, the fact that you look at it fondly is a rarity, and you're very fortunate.
I am very fortunate
that it didn't end incredibly bad and that all you want to do is cut it off your chest. And I think that goes to show the amount of communication that you two had to have had in your relationship. Still have. And how that relationship ended. That was a true significance of the friendship and the protocol within your dynamic, not kind of a last ditch effort to try to bring you closer together. But unfortunately, most of the time, that's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I cannot go through this section without strongly giving that opinion. My wife and I have been together for 17 years. We've been married for 12. I love tattoos, obviously. I think it's an amazing form of artwork. I have several, have hours and hours and hours of work on my body. And there is no way that I would ever get a tattoo that represented her on my body. If we had children, then children, yes. My parents, yes. A friend who has passed away, yes, I have one representing him, which is anti-biblical. Do not mark thy body for the dead, but I don't follow that rule. But when it comes to getting them because of current relationships, I just cannot stress that enough. As much as I stress communication, just don't do it. If you have a story on that, please share that with us. I don't know if you care to hear it or not, but I'm always very interested in those, and give me permission or ask me not to share it, because if some of these stories come in, I would like to share it in the FetLife group with your permission, of course. CauldronsCrypt.com/contact. All right. What about what it's made out of and the significance of the relationship? I think you were about to go there.
I was just going to throw in a little side note that the more rigid the material seems to be, the more serious the relationship it typically denotes. Steel rings for slaves on their commitment collars versus plain leather, or even the Velcro collars out there when you're just getting into it as a play collar. That's really going to show where you're at in your relationship. Is that you will find more rigid collars for serious relationships than not.
You know how there's an exception to every rule?
You like to be the exception.
Well, with a former slave, she was very much a narcissist. And I went to a local store, adult store, and bought one of those red and black kits, my first BDSM kit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's got the Velcro collar and the Velcro cuffs and ankle restraints and the super cheap little flogger that isn't even cool to hang on the wall. Nope. As decoration. I mean, the thing's just ugly. And that was her training collar. And she freaking hated red. Everything that she owned was pink. So it clashed with everything. And she was so forceful in trying to top from the bottom and tell me exactly what she wanted and how it had to be. She went to collarfactory.com, which I highly, highly recommend. I love that site. Their work is amazing. And built her collar and then sent me a screenshot of it with all of the information and what she wanted. Yeah, she didn't get that until it was time, and she didn't even get that specific one. It was made from Collar Factory, and it was pink, but that was about the only things that it was made of that was exactly what she wanted. Don't top from the bottom with me, because it's just not going to work out very well for you. And she was so angry when I got that out and put that on her. And it was the biggest lesson to her in the entire training period. Like, no, this is not the way things work. I do not tolerate bratting. If you push me, then I'm going to push back. And, it's your choice whether or not you want to wear this, whether or not you want to accept this, but don't screw with me. So, yeah. I
feel like you definitely made your point with that.
Oh, I did. Collars as weapons. That's one that's not on our list, but that's exactly how I used it. I used it as a weapon and a training tool.
So let's go ahead and talk about why collars matter to us. Do you want to go ahead and take this one?
Sure. Wearing a collar can not only show others in the community who you are and what your relationship dynamic is, but it should also help shift that mental state like we've talked about with getting somebody into or keeping them in headspace. If you don't experience a shift in at least your mental state when you put on a collar, then the commitment to that relationship probably really isn't there, and you probably shouldn't be wearing a collar from that person, which is pretty short and simple, but it does bring us to our next point of why so many are starting to become upset about collars. And this is a huge pet peeve. I want to hear what you have to say before I hit my soapbox.
Okay. For those of us who are part of the lifestyle and have been in any seriousness, slapping on a collar and saying it's something more than a scrap of fabric when you haven't put in any efforts, any knowledge seeking, or any thought to its meaning is a huge slap in the face. We get it. Lots of people are wearing them as fashion statements right now, or you might be new and foolish, but please, please, please think twice before you toss on a collar and form a relationship after knowing them for a week. Doing so is basically the equivalent of a drunken wedding to a stranger in Vegas. It's really insulting and disrespectful. So honestly, that's the biggest thing, I feel like, as far as collars go right now.
Cauldron pops a cork in 3, 2, 1. Yes. We understand that you're new and that you may not understand the full meaning behind them, but this is inappropriate behavior. I am thankful that wearing collars has become a fashion statement because it allows those of us in the lifestyle to get away with it in public now, where that obviously has not been the case. But that last thing that Funsize touched on, that drunken wedding to a stranger in Vegas, taking that collar after a week, this is a fad. Now, I have basically been training, though it wasn't even recognized and wasn't official, for quite a while with my current one. But since September of last year is when we met, or when we started growing close, I guess, or becoming friends. I don't mean growing close as in a intimate way, but just in a friendship way. And then things started progressing sometime this year. And I had no desire to immediately just claim like a caveman and slap a collar on her. Don't do that. If you don't understand what it means, go back and listen to this. If you find somebody who is doing this, share this with them so that they can understand. But don't just Dharma and Greg it and get married. And yeah, that's deep cuts from an old TV show. But don't just get married the first night that you meet. It's not going to work. I have very close friends that have done this in the past 6 months to a year. I've seen it. They were together for a month or 2 months, and then all of a sudden there was no training collar. There was no consideration collar. It was just that commitment collar. Right, boom, out of the gate. Okay, fine. You're in a relationship. Do the proper steps. And those relationships blew up in their face because they jumped to a commitment that they were not prepared for. And I have every confidence in the fact that if they would have taken the proper steps, they would still be together. But they put so much pressure on themselves by the significance, the misunderstood significance of a collar that was given too early, that it actually affected not just them, but rippled throughout the community to those that knew them and cared about them. It brought out the worst in them. And you take two amazingly beautiful people and put them together, and sometimes what you get when people go too fast is a big pile of crap, and it causes everybody to stink. So that's just something that I am passionately, fervently against, that I educate new people on when I see them at munches and hear them talking about this whole collaring thing. And I'm very quick to say, be extremely hesitant when it has been too long in the relationship, when you feel that it should have happened maybe 4 or 5 months ago, then it's probably a good time to start with the collar behind the one that you think you need to give now. Meaning that, okay, well, I think I need to give a consideration collar because it's been 6 months. Yeah, maybe now would be the time to take a step back and give a training collar and go through that for a few months. And my wife and I were together for 5 years before we got married. Don't do it. Take your time. There's nothing wrong with it. Otherwise, you're into frenzy, and it's just going to end badly. And I cannot tell you how many times over and over and over I've seen amazingly beautiful people almost destroyed by the act of inappropriately giving and receiving a collar. So that's my cork popping and soapbox on that. Funsize, while I take a sip of coffee and cool down a little bit.
I think that actually really wraps up this whole conversation about contracts and collars. It really just goes over how to properly use them, what kind of tools they are, and what they can mean for your relationship if done correctly. Mm-hmm. And I think we hit some really good points on that.
So a final note or two. I've already thanked our producers. Thank you again. BDSMcontracts.org. I've already mentioned those, but what I didn't mention is if you're cruising around that website, and Lily has some amazing videos over there too that you may want to check out. They're free. Yeah, you get put on her mailing list, but she doesn't spam. I checked it out for myself because I wanted to make sure I still wanted to promote her, and I don't promote spammers. But use the coupon code Cauldron20, that's KULDRIN20, and you'll get a 20% discount off of all purchases. Finally, whippingstripes.com, my personal maker of leather and paracord impact toys. April is phenomenal. I just cannot talk about her enough, and she doesn't pay me for it. I really love her that much. Next on the Krypt, we're going to dive into, this is a fun topic. Who pursues whom? In the meantime, go to cauldronskrypt.com for show notes, how to subscribe information, and a link to the FetLife group so you can take part in the conversation over there. Funsize, is there anything that you would like to say before I completely close us out here?
No, I just want to wish everyone a really good day.
Excellent. This has been Master Cauldron and Funsize for cauldronskrypt.com. Unearth the truth.